So we're introducing equanimity this week. This is the paramis for the month of October. And equanimity is the 10th and the last of the paramis that we've been studying over much of this year. Equanimity is also one of the Brahma Viharas, the heart qualities. And it's one of the factors of awakening. So clearly, it's an important quality for us in moving towards the peace and freedom that we seek. The Buddha called equanimity sublime. But I'm not sure it's always well understood. At least it took me a long time to kind of get it. The word itself isn't something that I get an intuitive feel about. I know it has something to do with balance. It shares a root with equilibrium, with equal, all these things that are in balance. But it's so easy for me to think that equanimity, that balance is figured out in my head. It taps into that rational part of my brain. And when I do that, there's no softening in my heart. I have to remind myself frequently that equanimity is a heart practice. And that's where the balance is found. There are a lot of ways to describe or to think about equanimity in our practice. And one of the descriptions that especially resonates for me is a heart that can hold vulnerability or can hold not knowing, a heart that can open to pain and can rest in the midst of all of it. And there's a word in Pali that describes equanimity in just that way. Excuse me. It's not the better known word, upekkha, which means to look over and to see the big picture without being caught by what we see. This word is tatramaj hatata, not an easy one, which translates as standing in the middle of all this. So I'd like to share a story that metaphorically speaks this quality of equanimity for me. It took place in 1992 during the Bosnian Wars in Sarajevo. And it's about a man, Vedran Smilovic, who responded in a personal way to the atrocities of the war he was living through. When 22 people were killed by a mortar shell while waiting in line for bread, Smilosevic stepped out onto the street with his cello and played the same piece of music for 22 days. One day for each person killed. He put on his formal concert attire. He walked out of his apartment into the midst of the battle raging around him. And he played his cello every afternoon for an hour. He played Albinoni's Adagio in G minor. He would place a little camp stool in the middle of the bomb craters in the town square and play a concert to the abandoned streets while bombs dropped and bullets flew all around him. And day after day, he made his own personal and courageous stand for compassion and for peace. And miraculously, he was never harmed. Equanimity. I'm just so touched by this image, by the resolve and balance and heartfulness of this man's actions. He must have had a beautiful, steady heart, a heart that didn't close up and freeze in fear, a heart that was touched by compassion, but didn't sink into despair. So I hear it as a heart that was able to rest in the midst of everything. And I know this story at some level is very foreign. I feel very grateful that I've never lived in a war zone. I really don't know firsthand what that's like. And I recognize that some of you may have, and some of you may have fought in war zones. So I understand that maybe this has a little bit of a different understanding to you. But I want to use the story as a metaphor. And in that way, I'm hoping that it might be helpful. We're all facing battles. They might not be as big as this one, but we're facing little battles frequently. These are the places that we resist, where we might fight when things do not go our way, when we don't like the way things are, and we just want them to be different. So this is where we can practice. It might be as simple as hearing the incessant beep of a truck backing up while we're trying to meditate. If only that would stop, I could have a good meditation. And we constrict, and our hearts shut a bit, and we lose our equanimity. Instead, can we find just a bit more space to hold this, to rest in the midst of the noise? Or a body hurts and our mind can't let go of trying to get rid of the pain. I know I find myself in this place sometimes. And instead, might we learn to just rest with the discomfort, provide enough space that we can hold it? Or here's another example. Maybe I said something to someone, I just blurted it out without really thinking, and I really regret it afterwards. The internal dialogue in my head is pretty rough. Just listening to the tone of that voice berating myself, it hurts. It's a little battle I'm doing with myself. And instead of battling, equanimity might suggest I create some space, rest in the midst of that painful feeling of regret. Try to offer metta to myself and then see what happens. Lori spoke pretty directly about this on Monday. When someone said something hurtful to her, I don't know, but maybe they placed blame on her, rightly or wrongly. But instead of immediately jumping to defend herself, she found a way to make space for the feelings. She said something later. It's not that she didn't speak, but she said something after the shock of the comment had integrated a bit. She tended to herself first and then responded more mindfully. These metaphorical battles, they're inside us, and they're in our relationships with others, people close to us, our friends and family, and even people we don't know. Think of how equanimity might support us when we read about the politicians in the news each day, instead of having those internal fights about what's right and wrong in politics. So really, there are opportunities to practice equanimity all day long. There are so many places where we resist things as they are, where we don't meet the moment with a balanced heart-mind. And sometimes we turn these moments into battles because we forget that we can rest in the midst of the unease. This cellist in Sarajevo responded to the battle he was living through. And I don't think his intention was to fix the situation. I really don't think it was an action that arose from his rational mind. It was a response of the heart. It was filled with equanimity that allowed him to hold it and rest in the midst of it. So I just want to add an addendum to this story. And it's to remind us that our practice of equanimity makes a difference. Even in the small moments, our practice creates ripples that go outward. We can feel them inside us as we have moments of more ease in our lives, when not everything gets to us and makes us so reactive. And certainly, those around us feel the ripples when we're more equanimous in the world, when we don't lash out so quickly, when we're able to keep our hearts open and just rest. So the addendum to the story about this man who sat in the middle of this bombed out town green for 22 days, the news media picked it up. People heard about it and it touched their hearts. And 15 years later, Yo-Yo Ma, who is also a real hero in my book, he wrote a piece of music, another piece of music in honor of the cellist of Sarajevo. And he won an award for it. So we're definitely not practicing with a goal of wanting to receive an award. My point is just that it makes a difference. Small moments of equanimity, being able to rest in the middle of whatever arises. It creates ripples. People feel it, and it makes a difference in the world. So hopefully this is an inspiration to turn our attentions toward our own practice so that we can find that place of rest in the midst of things for ourselves. So thank you so much. And let's turn our attentions towards our practice, towards our bodies first, and offer them what it is they might need in this moment to open, trying to find and create some sort of literal figurative space in our bodies so that we'll be more able to find space in our hearts and in our minds. So take your time with this. Really let your mind kind of do a little bit of a scan through your body and see where there might be tension in the big places, in the little places. And as you're ready, bring yourself into a posture of relative stillness, a place that's comfortable and also stable. This feeling of stability in us is the ground on which we can begin to practice equanimity. Begin to feel a balance in ourselves. So it's really helpful to spend some time feeling the weightiness of our sits bones on our seat. feeling our spine erect and stable, resting on our hips. And inviting the body itself to settle and relax. And we notice as we bring our attention inward into our body that that sense of stability and relaxation, if the body offers it, the heart and mind can begin to settle in those ways as well. And slowly we begin to find rest from the stream of thoughts, from the constrictions in our body and our heart. They begin to loosen. Bringing a simple sense of friendliness to our internal environment. And just an easy sense of welcome to whatever is arising for you now. And how are things in this moment? Is it okay just the way things are? Or are you feeling any discomfort in your body that you can feel yourself constricting around? Any thoughts that you interpret as disturbing your practice? And just practice with the possibility of creating enough spaciousness that you can rest in the midst of that. It's just the way it is in this moment. And is your heart engaged? Is there a sense of softening and welcoming? And maybe in the last minutes of our practice today, just reflecting on why we practice here on the cushion, why we invite in ease and balance and spaciousness, so that in our lives off the cushion, maybe more complicated lives, we might remember that this is a place where we can rest. Thank you all. Thank you